Because during the whole movie, huge spoiler warning. I'm like halfway through the video right now. Huge spoiler warning. I'm just gonna let you know that. I'll put that at the beginning. Hey guys, another video. This might be a surprise video. We just watched Skinamarink, and I gotta say, it's pretty good. Half D's, half D's. I'd give it a half D's. I'd say it's about half D's out of full D's. Yeah, I've always been really into horror, and I kind of started getting introduced to analog horror. Yeah, analog horror is like a new genre of horror that's coming out. And yeah, I was introduced to it, and I kind of noticed it as it was coming out. The creepypastas kind of spawned into different types of analog horror videos. I didn't really understand it at first. It just kind of irked me more than anything. But then, yeah, after watching Skinamarink, or after watching Wendigoon's breakdown of Skinamarink, yeah, I kind of started to piece together, yeah, what I was actually feeling. That's just how it feels to be adult scared. We both watched Skinamarink. I had watched Wendigoon's breakdown of it, but I hadn't seen it yet. And Cody was going in fresh, so we both had very different takes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely different takes on it. I think like Jordan had a little bit more of a perspective on what to kind of expect, and I was just assuming it was gonna be like some like slasher, gory, something typical horror, but it was definitely different.
Horror does get predictable. It is very formulaic, and that's why it's such a risky genre. When you find a good one, it's a really good one. Yeah, and Skinamarink was a really good one. Yeah, kind of like the back rooms is kind of like a good example of analog horror, and the Mandela catalog. That's a whole series that you should definitely check out if any of this interests you. Yeah, all these other genres just rely on these jump scares or these loud noises or these shocking images.
Hello?
Where analog horror really hones in on this like really primitive, like nostalgic feeling of things that you recognize and things that you know what they are, but they're not quite right and they don't quite add up. And it's like the uncanny valley type feeling. Oh yeah, so what I was saying was that the difference between traditional horror and analog horror is traditional horror is about a scary monster jumping out at the right time with loud booming music to startle you at specific points in the movie. But analog horror is more like a figure that kind of looks like your mom coming into the room, but you don't quite see her face, and she tells you to meet her in your dad's study, but you know that you're not supposed to go to your dad's study. And your dad's study is at your parents' house, and you haven't been there for 25 years. And then you start to realize that the figure looks different than it did when you first saw it.
Yeah, that's pretty much analog horror. Not to be confused with anal log horror, which is really popular in Germany.
And I highly recommend it. And yeah, I felt with Skinamarink, it was so much like that. How the cinematography was all from like the kid's perspective, and all of the images were like recalling distant, traumatizing memories that you didn't realize were as traumatizing as they were. At the beginning, it was a little hard. If I hadn't watched Wendigoon's breakdown of it before watching the actual movie, I probably would have shut it off like halfway through. It took a really long while to get into it.
Yeah, no, it definitely was a slow burn. Like at the beginning, like pace wise, it felt like it was John Goodman if he was a sloth and a turtle hybrid. Yeah, like as soon as it hit, there was like a specific moment, in the middle of the movie. At that moment, like we both were just like, oh, things are like picking up now, and like the whole atmosphere changed, and then we were both right on the same page. So
yeah, not knowing where it's going, it takes a really long time to get into the meat and potatoes of it. Meaty potatoes. Yeah, it's almost like this feeling of being a child, and it hones in on this feeling of nostalgia.
Yeah, like the movie overall was just, it had like a really kind of like dark, dingy atmosphere, kind of like vibe to it, kind of like You know, like kind of like a damp kid's bedroom feel to it. And like all the angles were all really like distorted, and it was definitely something that like visually and audio, like auditorily.
Oh yeah, another spooky element to it. It might just be me, but I always love when they open up the ending to kind of imply that the viewer is the next target. And they have a really cool way, really spooky way of doing that at the end of this movie. A really good example of this is the Ring movies, and you see the movie and you die in 7 days. But I had a DVD collection growing up, and it had the original Ring movies from Japan, and it had the American remakes, and it had in the special features it had the original VHS tapes that you could see. So it let you watch them, and it was kind of like you're gonna die in 7 days after you watched it. I fully believe that. It's slowly this entity or whatever is slowly gaining more and more ability over the house and control over the house. It starts out stretching out from the TV, then affecting people physically, then affecting people emotionally and mentally, and manipulating people into doing things, and then manipulating the environment and manipulating time, and then it stretches out from the movie that you're watching into your real life, into your living room. I literally said, "Get out of my living room."
And yeah, I think the main thing that I found most like kind of like creepy about it was just the effect it did have on the kids, even though, you know, I hate kids, of course. But I think it was just, it was the play that, you know, I couldn't imagine my children being in that position. Like, it wasn't creepy from a perspective of if I was in that, you know, house, because I know I would, like, yeah, like, you know, probably just bust down a wall, right?
Yeah, as an adult, you would immediately just bust down a wall.
Yeah, exactly. But as a kid, you're just waiting for someone to come to your aid, and I think that's what really, like, personally as a parent, like, that's what scared the crap the most out of me. It's just like these kids are just waiting and waiting and waiting, and it's like that's just so anxiety inducing, and like that's pretty much what you had to work with the whole movie. So
it's a movie that puts children in a dangerous position, so a lot of people, that's a huge turnoff right away. But I mean, kids are like, I don't really. It's a movie. I don't really mind what's depicted. Like if it needs to be depicted, and it didn't go over the top with it. Like there was some graphic parts, but it didn't show anything. It just kind of implied it mostly.
yeah, it seemed like they, in terms of like how they did the special effects, they were really smart with it. They definitely didn't go above and beyond for sure. You know, definitely could have used a couple more creepy nuns, or like maybe some goatsies or something like that, you know, in the background.
Haunted goatsies, that's always the go-to.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so I'm really psyched on analog horror and this new genre that's coming out, and if this movie does really well, which I'm hoping it does, we can start seeing more experimental movies like that. Because those are the ones that are really good, especially in the horror genre. Another one, a huge one I'm going to recommend on Shudder as well, is Scare Package. They have 1 and 2 out. It blew me away. I threw it on, the first one, while I was cleaning. And I immediately had to call up my friend and be like, we have to watch this together. I'm not finishing it until we watch it together. And then the second one just came out, and I'm hoping they're going to make a whole franchise out of it. It's amazing for any horror movie fans.
We are in a horror movie. Nobody? Horror movie.
It's amazing. It feels like it's a horror movie written by horror fans for horror fans, just shitting on people that don't get horror the whole time. And just playing with the tropes. I love movies that play with the tropes and play with the expectations and things like that, and that movie does it phenomenally. There's so many references that you notice, and so many things that are like, that's gotta be a reference. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Skinamarink. I had to get it out there while it was still fresh in my brain. And yeah, if you're one of the 33 or 4 subscribers that have subscribed in the last week, you know who you are. What's your name?
What's your name?
Have you ever asked your parents to buy you a shirt? Do you constantly find yourself freezing your own nipples off of your own body? Have you ever been kicked off a beach because you took someone's shirt? Have you ever gotten in a fist fight because you weren't wearing a shirt? Have you ever been kicked out of a Chuck E. Cheese because you weren't wearing a shirt? Have you ever been kicked out of a funeral because you weren't wearing a shirt? Did you used to have a shirt but then left it at that laundromat that one time? Do you want a gift? If any of these things have happened to you, why don't you have that at one of my shirts?